food is something we interact with at least 3 times a day, if not 6-8 times a day. We have to be in conversation with food. We have to have a relationship with food. That's why it's so imperfect, and that's why it's so full of mistakes. It's not mistakes, we learn from them. But we can't have a kind of clean break away from the chocolate and the cake. We have birthday parties, we have events, so it's a real learning curve with food, and it's a challenge.
Hey yo, it's the LifeShot podcast. Change your world and change the world.
Hi, this is Clint Grove from LifeShot. Today I'm with Dahlia Weeinreeb, who's a registered dietitian, and you work in Cambridge, got your own practice. Dahlia, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And we want to talk about everything that excites you today. And because it actually excites me as well, talking about health, wellness, nutrition, and optimizing ourselves, making sure that we're ready to go, face the challenges of life in the best possible, I suppose, what's the word? Shape. There we go. Why don't we start with that particular thing, which is optimizing our health. And I think you might have said this because I was looking at your website. Optimized health equals great performance. Yeah. So how do we get there? If someone's never heard of this type of thing, optimizing your health for good performance, how do you explain that?
The bottom line is that, performance sounds very competitive. I don't mean in a competitive way. I mean in terms of being our best selves. So we're born with a certain genetic potential, and we want to optimize that. So never ever comparing ourselves to others, just in terms of our comparison with ourselves. Am I achieving all the things I think I could be achieving mentally, physically, spiritually, in my relationships, in my career? Do I feel excited when I wake up in the morning? Do I like my life? And often nutrition plays a very big role in allowing that to happen.
Is that something measurable? Because you said don't measure yourself against somebody else.
Is it measurable? I mean, it would be measurable in certain dimensions. It would be measurable in terms of blood test parameters. It would be measurable in terms of, I often get patients to score how they feel. So if someone's coming with lots of abdominal bloating, for example, I'll tell them to do a scale for me 1 to 5 every day and then score each day. And we know we're making progress when the scores are going down. Is it measurable in terms of mental, spiritual health? That's immensely subjective. I mean, I guess loved ones could say, this person's been so much happier and so much more fulfilled.
So that's an outside perspective of somebody who's going through change.
And we also need to detach ourselves somewhat from everything being measurable. We have this notion in society sometimes that if it's not measurable, it's not meaningful.
And you don't think that's...
And one of my greatest teachers once said, I was 17, he said, you can't put love in a bucket. And I love that. And it's so true. You can't measure your love for someone or something, but you trust in it and you can feel it, and then people can feel it from you. And so it's very much a journey of yourself and how you feel in yourself. If someone says, I feel better than I did 6 months ago, that's what's important to me.
That's all you need, really, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
And so to get there, let's talk about some practical steps that we might take, optimizing health, types of food, for example. How do you tackle those situations? Everyone's different. Everyone's got different taste buds. How do you go about it? And is it like a blanket recommendation?
It's never a blanket recommendation because people are so different. People are coming from different starting points. People have different likes and dislikes. People have some food phobias. People have some bad food memories. Oh. And so my joy is always the individual. I'm like, I love someone coming to me and they're complete individual. And I have to find a way in. So let's say, most people increasing their leafy green vegetables is a very good thing to do. What if someone says to me, but I don't like leafy green vegetables? I don't say, well, you have to eat them, because that's the wrong attitude. I have to find a sneaky way to get them in a way that they enjoy. And I like the challenge of that. So it's blanket in terms of, yes, We want to be having a broad range of foods, mostly plant foods, high quality animal protein. Some people do well with grains, some people do less well with grains. You know, there's an individuality there. But overall, the blanket statement would be a diet of whole foods, natural foods. I would say, you know, keeping our processed foods to an absolute minimum would be a good move for everyone. People will automatically feel better when they stop doing that.
How do you tackle that when, because I think I've got a slight bad relationship with food still, and I think I want to work on that. We can talk about that later.
Sure.
But in this situation, so like increase the leafy greens, and I heard a teacher talking about eating live food, as in food that's not cooked, as live as possible, and that helps your digestion and give you more energy.
Some people.
Really?
Some people.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Not everyone can tolerate raw food as well as they can cooked food. It depends what their starting point is. Some nutrients become more available in cooked food than they do in raw food. A lot of people who go from a typical kind of Western diet onto a diet rich in raw foods get horrible gastric upset. And I often spend time in this clinic fixing that for them. So they get a bacterial overgrowth in their small intestine and they are just constantly gassy, constantly in pain. And their bowel movements change. And so it isn't that simple. We have to look at the starting point for that person. I'm a big fan of gradual transitions in the diet. I don't like anything drastic. I think it's a simple law of physics. What goes up quickly will crash down quickly, and we really need to pace it. Also, when we talk about nutrition, we're speaking about behavioral change, and behavioral change doesn't happen overnight. We have to pace it.
So someone who is eating bread a lot, let's say for breakfast, lunch, and maybe even having a slice of bread after dinner, how do you tell them, you know, cut down on your bread, don't just cut it right out?
Gradually. It depends on the person in front of me. If I have a patient presenting to me with clear, you know, gastric distress, so it might be a Crohn's or colitis patient, or it might be a candidate for celiac disease, I sometimes will completely remove gluten immediately. But I have to see the distress in that person, and I have to, you know, see the clinical indicators to do that. But what we might often do is just replace it with a gluten-free bread as a first step. Now, I don't want them eating 6 slices of gluten-free bread a day either, but to take them from, obviously they're eating a lot of bread because maybe they're rushing, maybe they don't know how to cook, maybe they don't have someone taking care of them. It's convenient. So you can't just say to someone, don't have that anymore, without giving a reasonable replacement until you figure out, oh, how did they come to lean on bread so much in the first place? And that takes time to figure out.
Because I do still like my bread. I'm trying to cut down on it. Okay. And so because I've got a bread maker, and the smell of bread is wonderful.
But I can see from looking at you that you're a fast burner.
Oh, okay. So just by looking at a person.
So you probably need quite a significant amount of carbohydrates in order to feel your best. Whereas someone who's not a fast burner can live without grains completely. So you might really struggle to have a life with bread if you're an exerciser. If you were sitting on the couch all day, it might be easier for you. But it's all about then how you couple those grains into your diet in a way that they don't cause too much blood sugar spikes going on. So again, we look at the person, and just by looking at you, I would say you're a person that probably wouldn't do well on a low carb diet.
So like
in the long run.
Yeah. So not to cut them out totally, but to not have as much.
Not have as much, or the way you combine it as well. Are you having it on its own? Are you having it with more carbohydrate? Are you having bread with jam? Or are you having bread with, I don't know, hummus and salad and a bit of chicken? It's completely different. It behaves differently in the body. Yeah,
so talking about body types, because I had that written down here. Can we classify humans into body types even? Is that something that's even done?
I mean, definitely some alternative practitioners do it. Ayurvedic medicine, they do that a lot. They have, I think, 3 different body types. I find it very interesting. I do it clinically to a degree in my own head. This kind of person, just by looking at someone, are they more kind of wiry and athletic, or are they more kind of softer and larger, and they tend to be less excitable in character as well. It's more kind of very calm and sedate. It's wonderful to see the combination between character and body type. We do tend to see
correlation.
In my mind, there is. I mean, I think these things only come about 12 years clinical practice, treated thousands of people. You start to see types, but it's a very big mistake, I think, to get caught in that typing. I love the uniqueness of people, and so I'll have hints from that typing, but I want to be proven wrong. I want that person to be an anomaly in that theorizing, so to speak, because that's the whole fascination for me. This person's like this in that way, but actually in that way they're different. And how can I play and dance with that so they have a really healthy relationship with food?
And life has a way of doing that too. We think we know something, and all of a sudden, okay, I need to
Don't get
readjust.
too comfortable.
So, can we talk about alcohol?
Yes.
What's your take on alcohol? Let's just leave it at that kind of question.
What's my take on alcohol? I mean, alcohol can be a nice part of the human diet. I think a lot of things are about intention. What are we using that alcohol for? Do we just simply like the taste of it with a meal? Can we self-regulate with it? Then that's great. If we're using the alcohol to free ourselves from emotional pain or spiritual pain, if we're using the alcohol to prevent us from, interacting with people we don't want to be interacting with, things like that, then I don't think it's a very healthy thing. So, alcohol is one of the things that humans use to treat themselves for pain. We'd have to look at the relationship there. Plenty of studies show that alcohol consumption in moderate amounts can lead to overall health. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it depends on the person and their character and how they're using it in their life.
I want to talk about our relationship with food, and I know you speak about that probably with your clients and on your website. And there was I just read a thing here called emotional eating.
Yeah.
And I suppose when we grow up, as parents, we might tend to condition our kids to do emotional eating.
Sometimes, yeah.
What's your take on emotional eating?
Well, first thing, I really resent the diet mentality or the diet making people feel like comfort eating is completely a terrible thing to do.
Right.
Because it's completely natural. And like I say to my patients, you have a baby. Their first introduction to food is mother's milk. So it's warm, it's sweet, it's a hug, it's comforting. Let's say my toddler has breastfed and he's had his lunch, so he's full. He falls and he hits his head. He wants to come and breastfeed. What's he looking for? He's looking for comfort with something sweet and warmth. So it's completely natural to want to comfort eat. It's not morally wrong. We're all going to do it a little bit. And I think we need to embrace it. I sit, I watch TV, I have my chocolate, I love it, I am with it, right? The problem is when we're comfort eating all day long. The problem is when most of our eating is comfort eating, or a lot of it is, and then we start noticing negative health impacts from it. Or maybe that comfort eating is taking the place of salad and protein and, legumes, whatever it might be. Then we need to look at ourselves and say, I think this is getting a bit out of control. Maybe I'm in a difficult job or difficult marriage or difficult friendship. I need to really get some help and change the trigger. So comfort eating is natural. Comfort eating to a small amount is, I think, a wonderful thing. Like I always say, we don't just have sex to make babies. We also have sex for pleasure. So it's the same thing with eating. We eat for pleasure as well. So we mustn't over-focus just on the nutrition aspect because there's a pleasure aspect there as well. But we need to just check in with ourselves. And, it's a natural thing to do. You asked me about parenting though.
Yeah. Well,
I do not comfort my children with food.
Okay.
So beyond the breastfeeding, I reward them with a story or with a book or with a hug or say I'm so proud of them. I do think it's a mistake to teach children that when they, do well at school or if they behave or if they tidied their room, here, have a cookie, here, have a biscuit, because that's going to teach them when they're older that every time they do something good or every time they feel sad, they need to have something sweet. And that's a sticky situation to put your child in. So I do warn parents not to do that. There's many other ways we can reward our children, but there's nothing wrong with at the end of a long day wanting to sit down with some chocolate or some ice cream.
Yeah.
When you've had a healthy diet the whole day through.
So don't feel too guilty about that.
And guilt isn't relevant to eating anyway, as in we should not feel guilty. Even if we're eating, Cadbury's cream eggs the whole way through the day, guilt doesn't come into it. The diet industry is what teaches us to feel guilty, that it's bad, that it's naughty, that it's, cheeky and we've had a naughty day. No, moral judgment does not come into our relationship with food. Curiosity does. Self-compassion does. And from there we say, this isn't making me feel very good. This isn't optimizing me. Let me try and change it, versus you greedy pig, why did you eat the 5th cookie? You probably ate the 5th cookie because maybe you didn't have a proper lunch, maybe you were tired, maybe someone upset you. But to take it from an aspect of, shaming or feeling guilty, never ever works. That drives disordered eating. That drives people to then want to restrict and be good, which after 3 days of being good, read as 1,000 calories, not enough food, what they're going to do, they're going to rebound into bad. And then we see people with eating disorders who've got into that cycles for months and years, and they feel so awful about themselves. It's heartbreaking. And I think 50% of my client load at the moment are people with disordered eating. It's
so
horrific.
in a way, you're kind of doing psychological work sometimes to try.
I think it's 90% that. And I think any dietitian who is good at their job, because a lot of what we do is coaching, really, behavioral change. Because it's not like alcohol or cigarettes, which you can cut out of your life. So that is still behavioral change, but you can have a black and white approach. You can say no more. Food is something we interact with at least 3 times a day, if not 6-8 times a day. We have to be in conversation with food. We have to have a relationship with food. That's why it's so imperfect, and that's why it's so full of mistakes. It's not mistakes. We learn from them. But we can't have a kind of clean break away from the chocolate and the cake. We have birthday parties, we have events, so it's a real learning curve with food, and it's a challenge.
So you must deal with quite a few people who come with advice they've been giving, and that advice is wrong, and you've got to try and deal with those type of things.
Yeah, I always say that I feel like the hairdresser who's fixing the bad haircut that came before me, because I'll have people come in here with the most amount of stuff that's things that they've either read off the internet or some underqualified nutritionist has given them advice, and that nutritionist hasn't checked that person's mental health as well. So this person may have full-blown anorexia, and then they've then told this patient that they shouldn't have grains or something. And this patient, that kind of patient will take that information as absolute gospel and then develop a phobia of grains, because that's the way their mind swings from black to white. And what we want to do is moderate and get into the middle of the nuanced place in nutrition. And people find that very, very hard. So, I get people all the time. People are very nervous to come and see me as well, because, when accessing your relationship with food is very delicate and very, very personal. And it's scary for people to change. It is scary.
Change is hard.
Change is very hard, particularly if you know that you're using food to mask deeper problems like family issues or relationship issues or work issues. You know that the unmasking of that is going to involve you having to make some very difficult choices in your life to make sure that your health is maintained, like leaving a toxic relationship. And that's really painful, really, really painful. So we do a lot of uncovering in here for patients. And I find that very, very a great honor, and it's very private for people.
So if I said something like our stomach rules us, you probably wouldn't agree with that necessarily, because we've just spoken about our relationship with food doesn't need to come with guilt trips and such.
No, it should come with joy.
With joy, yeah.
It should come with joy. Food is, I think food is one of the greatest pleasures in life. If we can't have a happy relationship with eating, we feel deep sorrow.
We shouldn't feel like our stomach is just some rogue organ that is telling us what to do, but rather be in a relationship with.
Must be in a relationship with it. Must be in conversation with it. There's no other way. If you want to have a happy life, listen, if you're going to get strong and healthy, if you're going to exercise, you're going to have a great appetite. Appetite is a wonderful feeling. It's wonderful to be hungry and then to be fed. How many people in the world don't have access to food? And how many people have health conditions where they can't eat and digest as well as they would like? If you've got an appetite and you like food, rejoice. Rejoice is the first thing. Rejoice. And I always say I much prefer a patient who's gained a bit too much weight from pleasure in eating than a patient who will not allow themselves any pleasure. That's a much harder nut to crack. We start with the pleasure. We're like, okay, it's delicious. Let's tone it down a little bit, or let's find a way that you can still have pleasure. But how wonderful that person knows what they enjoy. versus a patient when I'll say, what do you like? And they've been on so many diets over the decades that they've completely lost connection with what they like. So they say, I don't know what I like anymore. Like, I think I like hummus, but isn't it really high in fat? I'm not allowed it, you know, and we literally have to rebuild their relationship with food from the ground up.
So you're talking about diets, and on your website you say diets are, you know, it shouldn't be. What did you say about diets again? Because
I say lots of things about diets. Diets are one of the strongest predictors of developing an eating disorder.
Okay.
We have epidemic levels now. I would say most women have a disordered relationship with food versus an ordered relationship with food. Diets don't work. Diets absolutely don't work. If diets work, they wouldn't make so much money in the industry. And I mean, there's some very, very wealthy people making money off people's vulnerabilities about their body image and how they feel they should look or how they feel they should eat. I resent it. I don't like it. I'm like a one-woman band. And then there's other people like me out there, but we're trying to change it person by person and, you know, say, actually, I do help people lose weight if a person is overweight and if they're unhappy with their body. Because firstly, you can be overweight and you can be happy and you can be healthy. So you don't...
I was going to say, because we make assumptions that people who look overweight are not healthy.
It's really wrong. It's really, really wrong. So firstly, if someone comes in here and they say they want to lose weight, I really dig into, well, why? Is someone saying you should? Is society making you feel you should? Because I want to be absolutely clear that it's coming from that person. Second thing, I have full respect for aesthetics. Some people prefer to look slimmer. Okay, as long as there's no eating disorder there, I will help. But health is a number one priority. I will not help someone lose weight in an unhealthy way. And so oftentimes, actually, the reason that person has gained too much weight is because they have been eating out of balance. They haven't been meeting their nutritional needs. So as soon as we correct that, their body just organically sheds.
Without
you don't count
any
calories.
Yeah.
You don't need to.
No.
I don't have a weighing scales in this room. I never weigh my patients unless there's a medical indication, let's say for surgery. I don't weigh. I don't like it. I think it's very demeaning. The numbers on the scale that are given too much power. We can tell if we're losing weight. We change our belt notch. We don't need to be weighed.
Yeah.
We're not a number. So over the years, I've absolutely stopped weighing people. I don't measure people. It's about health. Is your blood sugar going down? You know, is your blood pressure going down? Do you feel better? Do you have more energy? Are you happier? Then we know we're in the right direction.
Yeah. I was watching Mind Valley, and there's something called Wild Fit, and the guy was talking about how he coaches people through this thing. He also doesn't like the word diet, anyway. He's saying that when you start to have a better relationship with food, the foods that you used to crave and eat a lot that were bad for you, you kind of start to think, oh, actually, I don't want that anymore.
Absolutely.
Is that possible?
Oh my goodness, so possible. Yeah. Number one, there's the behavioural side and there's a physiological side. Often if someone is attacking the biscuits when they get home at 6 p.m, they've been good all day. I mean, I see this in 90% of the cases. Their breakfast has been some like kind of pathetically small chia seed pudding. Their snack has been maybe an apple, and their lunch has been like a chicken salad, so leaves and protein. Absolutely zero carbohydrate. Then they're expecting themselves to perform all day. The brain burns a lot of glucose. And then they get home to the washing up and the kids and whatever, and they honestly expect themselves not to attack the biscuits. I mean, I would attack the biscuits. Everyone would attack the biscuits. You're over hungry. So there's
carbohydrates, but
of
sugar.
course,
Yeah.
your blood sugar's running too low.
Yeah.
So, you know, the first thing is to understand the physiological side, that people will call themselves a greedy pig and I'm out of control, I've got no willpower. Well, actually, it's just physiological. If we feed you enough until 5 p.m, you might come home and have 1 or 2 biscuits. You won't want the whole pack. So the first thing is to identify the physiological side. The other side is behavioral as well. Like, you know, we all get into habits. One of my questions for God is, why is it so much easier to get into bad habits than it is to break? You know, like, why is it so much easier to get into bad habits than it is to create good habits as a consistent thing? Because I'm fascinated with that. Because it's so true. You can be doing the right thing for 6 months, and the minute you allow yourself to like have a bender for the weekend, you like suddenly you're craving all those things again, and it's so unfair.
It is unfair.
I think we are like determined to be challenged all the time. But A lot of it's physiological. So what we notice actually is a person also, if we do blood test analysis, that person might be low in iron, B12, other nutrients. And the minute we correct that, they don't actually even want that donut anymore. It's magic to watch it happen, because what patients will say is, it's been so easy. I haven't even felt like I'm on a diet. And you're like, yeah, because you're not. There's this myth that it's really hard to eat healthily, and it's really hard to have a good body weight, one that's not too skinny, not too large, just where you should be. It isn't that hard. You just need to be under the guidance of the right person, and you just need to be really listening to your own body signals. So yeah, I'm very, very familiar with that.
So you spoke about you do all these good things, then you go away for a weekend, yeah. And then everything, it turns to pot. So we talk about eating scenarios, yes. And you speak about that. So how do we deal with it when we're traveling, and also when we're visiting people for a barbecue or something? What do you suggest?
Well, it depends. Is it a medical need? Like, for example, I have to be gluten-free and dairy-free, and so that's unfortunate in my life, and I've really tried to fight it, but there's no other way.
For yourself?
Yeah, I've had digestive issues from a very young age, and so, that's part of me staying well, which I'm sad about, but I'm at peace with it, and it helps me help my patients. But it means that if I fly or if I go to visit people, I have to make sure that I bring food with me to replace the bread or to replace, whatever. But outside of that, I really try to have fun and enjoy myself. So if there's a medical need, you need to prepare yourself, and you need to bring your supplies with you so that you can relax, because there's nothing worse than being glutened or, when you're away. It's a horrible experience if you can't digest that. If you are someone who can eat everything, but you're just worried about, would it be gaining weight? What would be the concern in terms of your question?
Maybe just being bad to your body. But
okay.
Yeah, so too much sugar.
Have you heard of orthorexia?
No.
So orthorexia is a relatively new term for an eating disorder, which is obsession with healthy eating. Okay. And we're seeing
that might be what I have.
Well, I can diagnose you. But it's an obsession with healthy eating that starts to really reflect the same kind of values we see in anorexia and bulimia and so on. One of the main values is rigidity. So people who start to shrink their social lives and shrink away from everyday scenarios because, then there's going to be unhealthy food there and I can't have that and so on. We really want to be careful with rigidity. You're not going to drop dead of a heart attack if you have pizza and a beer on a weekend at a party or you go to a barbecue. We have to have that flexibility in our eating relationship. The people that live the longest lives on this planet certainly aren't rigid. So they're mostly eating a very healthy diet, which means just authentic, natural foods. But the stress that you cause to your system when you get nervous about eating something processed once in a while.
Worse for you, right?
It's definitely worse for you. We know that socialized eating is very, very good for health. Okay. So sitting around a barbecue with friends might not be the healthiest food, but that enjoyment you're having by eating together and the laughter and the happiness, that's very good for health as well. So we have to, I'm always very clear with my patients, we practice socialized eating, we practice flexibility and fluidity. So my orthorexic patients who come in and they're worried about having 1 grain of sugar, their part of their work is definitely to have biscuits and cakes and for them to show themselves that nothing bad is going to happen. I need people leaving my clinic confident in themselves and their own instincts and not narrowing down their diet, because that's not good. It's not. Obviously, sometimes in a medical case like mine, you would have to narrow it down because there's no other way. But my goodness, the people who are doing gluten-free that don't need to be doing gluten-free, that's sad. Don't do it to yourself.
Yeah, as a gluten-free person,
Absolutely.
You're like, what are you doing?
What are you doing? You can have a real croissant once a month. Nothing's going to happen to you. Just make sure you get the best one so you can really enjoy it and dive into it. I mean, I think the saddest thing is when someone's eating, cake or biscuits and they didn't even enjoy it. Then they're just doing it mindlessly, and that's sad. If you're going to have a cake, put it on a plate, have a cup of tea, tell all the children to shut up, just quietly, like old-fashioned way. I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's definitely important. So I'm probably on the side where I'm a bit too much with my children when it comes to healthy food. So as a parent, and I feel like sometimes I'm being bad to them, because we went to a friend's house the other day and it was like a cake and tea morning. Aww. And I didn't have any of the cakes because I'm like probably a bit more orthorexic, whatever you want to call it. And then my kids are like, oh, it's about lunchtime, and I just gave them, and they just said, eat as much as you want, whatever. But in a way, I felt a little bit. I feel like I'm not being the best. I give them healthy stuff when I can, but it's hard. You got kids, you know how it is to try and feed them healthy things. Where's the balance for us as parents? Where does the guilt stop? Should there be no guilt? I don't know.
It's really, really hard. And like I say, when I had my daughter's, I think it was her 4th birthday party, I made this bright Hello Kitty cake. I mean, the actual cake itself was made with olive oil and things like that. But I mean, there was all this icing on the cake and she loved it. And there was a mum there who was orthorexic. And, you know, as soon as the cake came out, she grabbed her daughter and left the house. And, you know, I did say to her at a later date that, you know, you're not going to be able to continue that. Because the bottom line is, if we're not bringing up our children in like an organic commune in the middle of, you know, some field somewhere, if we're sending them to normal schools and we have to teach them how to self-regulate in normal society. And that's in terms of all of their human drives. And so I think it's really important not to shame children for wanting something very sweet, because it is very tasty and they're growing. So their metabolisms are very fast. So they're even more attracted to those sweet things. And that's their kind of socialized eating way of being. You know, it's a very, very difficult balance to strike. I try to keep my house, you know, empty of most things. So we don't keep crisps in the house because I love crisps so much that I just eat them all. So it's better for me not to have them in the house. I keep a tin with, you know, some chocolates and sweets and things in it. And they tend to have something after dinner. But we talk about it. So I know I say to them, well, you were at a party. If they ask for something, I say, well, you're at a party today. You've already had some. What do you think? Do you think, you know, if you were self-regulating, do you think that now's the time to have, you know, a 5th chocolate bar? But it's hard not to feel guilty because there's so much information out there. But I always keep in my mind, my goal is that they will turn into adults who can self-regulate, who can identify their drives, who can say, well, I had this before, so maybe I'll have something different now. So I do that even with, you know, if they've had an apple already that day and they want another apple, I'm like, well, why don't you grab a banana or grab some nuts? Because let's keep rotating the diet. Let's keep trying to get different things in. So I try to do that also if they've had cake or cookies. But there's no doubt that it's very, very difficult. Birthday parties, you know, it's hard to navigate that as a parent, certainly. I mean, we could have a whole podcast on that.
Definitely, because when I had no kids, I was like, yep, my kids are not going to eat any junk.
Of course, you know. We all say that. The first child discovers chocolate at 2 years old. The second child discovers chocolate at 9 months old. And my third, you know, I think 5 months old, he grabbed a piece of chocolate because he was there and he saw everyone enjoying it. You can't, I think being an overprotective parent is a real problem. Being a helicopter parent is a real problem. They have to be able to survive this world. We have to help them with that. And so it's a messy, messy scenario. Definitely, I think, in order to really delve into the parental thing, that would require like a whole hour's conversation with scenarios, because it depends on the child as well and depends on the parents in the home. But all in all, no guilt, no shame, just remembering that term self-regulation. That's the most important thing. And oftentimes you will see a child self-regulate at a certain point.
Yeah, my oldest, she's 7, she does come to me and say, hey, Daddy, I'm eating healthy. So she shows me what she's eaten. Oh. So in a way, I think maybe I'm a bit too much. So I need to check myself.
Yeah, you don't want to create eating disorders as well. You don't want your children to be frightened to think cookies are bad, and for them to say that to other children, because when they start being exposed to all these messages about body image, you know, it's going to get messy. But children are different. My 10-year-old he has the sweetest tooth on the planet. He's obsessed with sugar. I mean, he really, really is. And, you know, he's got a very fast metabolism. My 7-year-old self-regulates amazingly. I have not parented them differently. They're different children. And so again, one of the reasons I was saying it needs a longer conversation is because, you know, I could keep a tin of chocolates and sweets out on the counter, and my 7-year-old, she might take one, or she'll stop in the middle of an ice cream. She prefers savory food. My eldest would be out of control. And so I can't keep it in the house like that, you know. So that's why, again, when people bring their children to me in clinic, I can really get to know the child and see what's the best strategy for them and helping them, because we can't, again, it's not a blanket statement, sadly.
Yeah. So you spoke about inflammation. What is inflammation and why is it bad for us?
inflammation is the base of all disease processes. So anything that's going wrong with the body starts with inflammation in one cell, and then it passes through tissues and systems, so to speak. So we have foods that promote inflammation, and we have foods that decrease inflammation. And so for all disease states and for health, we want to be on an anti-inflammatory diet, which happens to be, natural foods, not destroyed by burning and, all the other things that we might do with processing them. The anti-inflammatory diet is key for everybody if they want to have a good life, a healthy life, and to feel as well as they can.
So if you did have, let's say I had a cookie when I got home, or a peanut butter and syrup sandwich, that might cause a bit of inflammation, but if I counteract that with something good, then...
Yeah, I mean, you would put that as a pleasure window in your day. Chocolate's my big pleasure window, and I don't want to live without it. But if you know for the rest of your day you've had oily fish, you've had lots of leafy greens, you've had extra virgin olive oil, you've had almonds and walnuts and fruits and vegetables, you've laughed enough, you've moved enough, you've slept well. I loved working in geriatrics because I loved, if I was a patient who was 100 years old and very well in terms of, their mental capacity, I would sit on their bed and I'd say, tell me your secrets, and, what are your secrets in life? And every single one of them definitely had a slice of cake or a cookie in the afternoon. And this is a really important lesson for us in there, to just remember that, it's not always about what you eat, it's also about how you eat. Okay. Are you lonely? Do you have community? Is it fun? Are you at peace with that piece of cake, or are you constantly guilt-tripping yourself about it? Yeah. Are you shamefully shoving it into your mouth, or are you putting it on a plate because that's what you deserve?
I love that. That's awesome. So I think intuitive eating, that comes a little bit with it, doesn't it? So
absolutely, yeah.
What does that mean, intuitive eating? Does it mean like, maybe it's something that you normally eat and you just think today it's just not going to do well for me? Or
ideally, yes. Intuitive eating is being in touch with your appetite and satiety signals, not having any kind of guilt or moral judgment over what you want to eat. And that will automatically drive you to have a balanced diet, because you'll be like, I don't feel like that cake today. Actually, today I want a fruit or a salad. It sounds very, very nice, but intuitive eating can be very hard to achieve for a lot of people, particularly with the whole diet industry bombarding us and media bombarding us. And
does it take inner reflection?
It takes a lot of inner reflection, and it's almost like the peak of the mountain we have to climb up these days with respect to our relationship with food. So a lot of patients will come in here and say, I want to intuitively eat, and I'll say, just hang on a second. It might take us a while to get there, because first we need to discover your attitudes towards food and any underlying food messages that you've absorbed, fear foods. So fear foods are things that people think they're not allowed to eat because they're fat or whatever, or it's fattening, or their mum told them it was fattening 15 years ago, and they've retained that because they're a conscientious person. So first we have to clean everything up, organize everything. And then intuitive eating can be a wonder. I think that's what everyone should be doing. But we have to remember that humans are probably built for a feast-famine cycle. And thankfully, at least in this part of the world, we have feast, 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 feast. So in a way, we're having to almost have an artificial relationship with food, to the point that we don't get the famine part. So we're having to navigate our way through an abundant food system, not driven by hunger, driven by our thoughts and our intellectual processing, which can be really challenging because we have these basic primal drives to eat something yummy, which is sweet and fattening. That is yummy because it's energy dense. And then we have to kind of cognitively talk ourselves out of it because we already had it today. So it makes intuitive eating a lot harder, because you can intuitively, if you're under a lot of stress, if you're an underslept mum, right? And you have a lot on your shoulders, because of the undersleeping, automatically when you don't sleep enough, you crave more carbohydrates. You do. And so if I was to purely intuitively eat, I'd be driven towards the cake probably 3 times a day. I'm well known to attack the chocolate more than twice a day, and then I really have to talk myself down from the tree. So you could say that even me as a dietitian, I can't intuitively eat every day, because then I'll just eat all the things that my sleep deprivation is telling me to eat. So it sounds very, very nice. Okay. I think it's more complicated than that. I think it's quite an idealistic term, and I don't want people putting pressure on themselves to be able to intuitively eat all day, every day, because it can lead you down the wrong path when you've got to see the bigger picture. Yeah. Sadly.
And so Melissa lastly talk about sleep perhaps, and also intermittent fasting.
Yes.
Do you suggest intermittent fasting?
Do you mean like the 5-2 diet, or do you mean like
Kinda.
fasting, or having your last meal at like 7 p.m. at night? And then...
Yeah, so what I did last night, I had my last meal at 7 actually,
Yeah.
and haven't eaten yet. And I thought, I'm going to give my stomach a rest, because I ate quite a lot on the weekend.
Yeah.
So at the time I was feeling very full this morning. I thought, okay, I think I'll just give it a break. So is it something, and it's not easy, because it's not easy for me to not eat.
Yeah,
because I'm hungry. I'm hungry right now.
Yeah, you're a hungry person.
But do we need to put ourselves through that?
Not necessarily. It's dangerous. I definitely think that the body can do with a rest from eating after about 9 p.m. maximum, because then it lets the body focus on other physiological needs. We have to remember there's the scientific side, but then there's the behavioral side. And the behavioral side can cause a lot of problems, because if we become very attached to thinking that we need to do that in order to be healthy, then we can develop some dysfunctional behaviors around food. Then we're modeling that to our children, then our children will take it to a different direction. It starts to become very kind of leaky and messy. So, for example, the 5-2 diet, I like the science, I don't like the behaviors, because patients will often have blowout days for the 2 days. So they'll be like, well, I'm allowed to eat today, so I'm going to go to McDonald's and I'm going to have chips and I'm going to, and it's like, well, that's not very healthy, as in to be all or nothing. I think generally in life, what we notice is when we're polarized about something, it doesn't end up very well. We have to find the middle ground. So I'm definitely a supporter in a healthy person without an eating disorder, who's got a balanced relationship with food, who knows to be flexible, stopping to eat by 9 p.m., 9 p.m., and then eating again 12 hours later, starting again. But in terms of things like the 5-2 diet, I think are unless you're an exceptional person, our food environment and the media environment around nutrition is just a bit too dangerous right now in terms of eating disorders, which are epidemic.
Yeah, so a 12-hour break's good actually, isn't it?
I would say that's a very good start. And if everyone can achieve a 12-hour break, they'd be doing wonders for their health. And I don't think it needs to be more than that.
14 if you want.
14 if you want, 14 if you can. But if you want to perform through your day, again, it's one thing if you're going to sit on the sofa and watch daytime TV. It's another thing if you want to wake up, you want to exercise, you want to be there for your kids, you want to perform at work, If I was to come to clinic not eating, my patients wouldn't get good quality treatment. I need to eat properly in order to have the energy to help people.
Yeah.
And so it's all about your priorities. I love my career. I want to have a good career. I love my kids. I want to be a vibrant mum. I don't always achieve it. I want to be the best I can be. And to do that, I need to eat properly. We want a lot of things. Those of us that are kind of excited by life want to achieve a lot, and the time flies. So the fasting in longer than that, the 14 hours, might be more applicable to people who are either built to be able to sustain that or have a slower pace of life.
Yeah.
And they're burning less energy.
Oh, because then as people age, you might change.
You might change. Yeah, you do change. I mean, there's no doubt that as you get older, your energy requirements change. But not to mention the fact that lots of people, when they get older, lose their muscle tissue. So if you maintain your muscle tissue, you probably maintain your metabolism.
As you get older, if you...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not inevitable to lose your muscle tissue as you get older. We just stop moving as much, and so we lose our muscle tissue. So people obsess about osteoporosis or losing bone density. We wouldn't lose our bone density if we didn't lose our muscle density. So it's about maintaining that muscle, and then you probably stay just as hungry throughout your life.
So I suppose in your consulting and coaching, you probably touch on a few. Do you talk about physical exercise and movement?
Yes. So I call it, lifestyle medicine. So exercise, which I prefer to call movement these days, because again, exercise has been taken by the industry.
You think about gym or something like that, but it's more
gym, and people are thinking also about the interaction between, well, if I exercise this much, then I'm allowed to eat that, which really is very dangerous. Don't interlink your relationship with food and your relationship with exercise. We exercise or we move to be strong and to feel amazing, and we eat to enjoy and to be well. We don't want to earn, or because a certain kind of mindset will then enter this place where they earn their food.
Yeah.
Then an extreme mind will then say they're not allowed to eat unless they exercise, and it becomes very, very dangerous. So I don't like to interlink them. So we focus on movement, focus on sleep, focus on relationships. What kind of character type are we, if we're a highly sensitive person, are we making sure that we're not mixing with toxic people, things like that. It's very important because it's all affects your relationship with food.
Dahlia, it's been very interesting talking to you today, and I've really appreciated the balance that you brought into the conversation.
Pleasure.
Because I sometimes seem to swing this way and that way, but it's been refreshing hearing this.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And if people want to get hold of you, just to chat, maybe, where can they track you down?
They can Google me. They can find my website. It's just dahliamaorinutrition.com, or they can look at me at the Therapy Rooms website, which is where I work. I think those are the two main places.
Yeah. And you're fully booked at the moment, but people might have to be on the waiting list or something.
Yeah.
But Dahlia, it's been great, and I hope to have you on the show again soon sometime.
Thank you. Total pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.